Horror isn't always monsters and ghosts. Horror can sometimes come from the very mundane, and even better yet, it can come from your own mind. Even those that claim to have no fear have at one point in their life or another felt the rush of anxiety travel up their spine, warning them against a particular place, or person, or action. It's only natural after all. And sometimes villains love to use these fears against others, driving them deep into your subconscious, creating a paranoia and deep-seated intuition to flee. Before we begin, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. At no cost to you, every new sub helps us achieve our goals and keeps us motivated to creating more new content. Also, we've officially launched our new merch store, linked in the description, so be sure to check that out. With that being said, I'm your host, Jamie, and here are 10 must-see psychological horror thrillers. Number 1, Get Out. Written and directed by Jordan Peele, Get Out sees Chris Washington and his girlfriend, Rose Armitage, heading to the countryside to meet her parents. Chris is black and Rose is white, and given societal issues with interracial couples, he's worried about meeting them. It almost sounds like the setup to a comedy drama like Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. However, that illusion is dropped almost immediately, as upon entering the area, they are stopped by a white cop who immediately begins harassing him. And when he finally does meet her parents and their friends, everything seems off, like they are trying too hard to be accepting of him, almost studying him. Not long after, he finds out why, as he is hypnotized by the family matriarch and learns of a strange technique that allows people to take over other bodies. Kind of like the skeleton key, except with more science. What makes this film so great is how it combines very practical fears for people of color and racial tensions, and amplifies them as literally being replaced by white people, erasing them essentially. Of course, it's also brilliantly shot with tense and moody sequences, and a very eerie score that perfectly sets the scenes. Starring Daniel Kaluuya of Black Mirror and Black Panther fame, this is definitely a must-see and launch the horror career of Peele himself. Number 2, American Psycho. Based on the book by Bret Easton Ellis, American Psycho follows a wealthy and disconnected Patrick Bateman, a man obsessed with status, even if his subconscious desires drive him to try and destroy it. On the outside, he could be almost indistinguishable from any businessman in any high-money field. He's got that expensive suit, the customized business cards, the impeccable hair, and fancy car, the grand apartment, and so much more. But there's a secret side to him, a twisted and dark personality that loves taking prostitutes home and doing unspeakable things to them. He unleashes all his rage and murderous impulses on them, all while admiring himself as if he were a god. The film cleverly shows us his descent into depravity, how the slightest dent in his pride and perfectly constructed image causes him to lash out in absolute violence against those he deems inferior. And then, there's the ending. Did he really go on a killing spree? Did he really do all those awful things? Or did he just imagine himself to be that man who holds all the power, while truly just being a man in a suit? Pathetic, a working drone amongst a colony of drones. The book leaves things a little less ambiguous, but the film is almost perfect. Just avoid the sequel, as it was a by-the-numbers slasher flick with no substance. Number 3, Black Swan. Brought to you by the incredible visionary mind of Darren Aronofsky, Black Swan is first and foremost a story about obsession. All of us in one way or another have felt that pull, often leading us to do things that harm us in the long run. From eating disorders, to gambling addictions, to chasing after someone who doesn't deserve your affection. Talk to any single person and you will hear a tale of how their own obsession at one point or another led them to ruin. Some people are lucky to break free, However, in this film, Nina is unable to resist, and it leads her down a dark and destructive path. Her mother constantly pushes her own failed dream of becoming a world-renowned ballet dancer onto her. Her teacher gives her that affection she so desperately craves since she has no father figure in her life. But only when she gives him what he wants, and every day, there is a chance that someone younger, prettier, and better skilled might step in and steal it all from her. She stops eating to stay thin. She pushes herself to train and dance until she is almost collapsing from exhaustion. She grows envious of her new understudy for whom everything seems to come so easily and natural. And by the end of the film, she literally transforms from the bright-eyed and wondrous white swan to the dark-winged and terrifying black swan. A beautiful film with a haunting score and some of the best acting by Natalie Portman. This is a must-see for anyone who's ever felt like they aren't enough and pushed themselves too far. Number 4, Don't Look Now. This film revolves around a married couple who recently lost their daughter in a drowning accident and end up in Venice while still grieving. Here they meet a pair of sisters who claim to be psychic and able to see their deceased child. A few days later, after a night of passionate sex, John gets lost on his way out to dinner and catches a glimpse of a small girl in a red raincoat, looking exactly like his dead daughter on the day she died. His wife Laura attempts a seance with the sisters and is warned that John's life is in danger and they should leave Venice immediately. Laura does return home to England, but John stays, claiming the premonitions to be hooey. But while at a church, a scaffold collapses and nearly kills him, and so he believes that this was the danger the sisters forewarned him about. While all this is going on, there also happens to be a serial killer on the loose in Venice. Now, I don't want to spoil the ending here, as I'm sure you're starting to put the pieces together, but it's a brilliant twist, and the film itself is well acted and atmospheric, so I highly recommend you check it out for yourself. Number 5, Rosemary's Baby. I'm sure all of you here have heard of the term gaslighting. Well, this film is at its core an exploration of that term. Rosemary and her husband move into an old Renaissance revival apartment building in New York City. They are told of the dark past of the building, but every place has those kinds of tales, so they ignore it and move in anyway. There's quite a few interesting characters who live in the building as well, and some of them have some harrowing stories of their own. But again, doesn't everyone? One night, Rosemary eats some chocolate mousse, and it has a strange taste to it. But so as not to upset her husband, she eats quite a bit of it. Later that night, she begins to get dizzy and passes out during sex. She dreams of a demon raping her. The next morning, she has scratches all over, and her husband explains that he was really into the sex last night and is sorry he scratched her. He will cut his nails. Soon, she finds out she is pregnant, and not too long after that, she begins to suffer extreme abdominal pains. I'm gonna skip over a whole lot of what happens next, so as not to spoil the entire film. But as her pregnancy continues, more and more strange things begin to happen to her body and her dreams. Strange people start becoming active in her life. Even her husband begins to act differently. But they all keep telling her it's in her head, that these feelings are natural in some mothers, a side effect from the pregnancy. Until, of course, the ending of the film where the truth of it all comes out. It is absolutely brilliant and well shot, with fantastic performances by Mia Farrow and Ralph Bellamy, so definitely check this one out. There was a remake in the mid-2010s, but I'd avoid that one, as it feels cheap and is just filled with a cavalcade of jump scares. Check out the original 1968 version if you want a true masterpiece. Number 6, The Vanishing. Based on the novel The Golden Egg by Tim Crabb, the story is about a man who obsessively searches for his girlfriend after she disappears from a rest stop. Now, this film has been made various times, with different titles. So we are talking about the 1988 version here. But if you don't like your film subtitled, the same director remade this film in 1993 in English. As a young couple is driving across country, they need to stop for gas. So they pull over into a rest stop. Rex begins to fill up the car while his girlfriend, Saskia, goes inside to buy a few drinks and snacks. However, she never returns. A wealthy man by the name of Raymond has been desiring to abduct and torture a woman, and has attempted it before, but failed. So this time he poses as an injured motorist in need of assistance. Saskia, being the good person she is, of course tries to help, and thus is kidnapped. 3 years later, Rex is still searching for her. He has received postcards claiming to be from the kidnapper, asking him to meet in a cafe, but the kidnapper never shows. Unbeknownst to Rex, across the street from the cafe is Raymond's apartment, where he watches Rex repeatedly show up and wait. Now, as many of the other entries on this list, I don't want to spoil the ending, but this film is a truly disturbing depiction of what people who love to torture and manipulate others for their own fun. I do believe that the English version ends differently, but the original has quite a dark finale to it. Definitely worth checking out if you're a fan of mystery thrillers. Number 7. Seven. Directed by David Fincher, the man who brought you such great crime thrillers such as Zodiac and Mindhunter, tosses you into a dark and rainy noir crime world filled with endless gray skies and shadowy alleys, and of course, brutal crime scenes. As the first victim is discovered, the word gluttony is scrawled on the wall in grease and blood. So lead detective William Somerset declares that this is going to be the first of many gruesome scenes. His young new partner, David Mills, is the typical rogue cop, the hotshot who used to bust down doors and capture drug dealers and other criminals, and thinks he has what it takes to single-handedly rescue the city from crime. Somerset is supposed to be retiring, however, and doesn't want to spend his last days working on such a big case that might take years to solve, but is forced to anyway. The following day, another victim is discovered, this time with the word greed written in blood at the scene. Putting two and two together, Somerset begins to theorize the killer is using the 7 deadly sins as his template, and floats this theory to his partner, who, albeit not the brightest crayon in the box, eagerly tries to help put more of the pieces together. Now, this movie was tailor-made for a multiple rewatch scenario, as after you've seen it the second time, you'll notice that the two detectives actually meet the killer pretty early on in the film. There's also a lot of little clues to foreshadow the twist ending, which is one of the greatest in movie history. What's in the box indeed? Number 8. Misery. Based on the book by Stephen King, many celebrities have had strange and unusual encounters with fans. Some that were quite terrifying, and sadly, some that ended in violence and death. Stephen King himself has talked about some of these encounters, and he used his personal experiences to write one of the most intriguing stories featuring fan obsession. Since the birth of the internet, fans now have the ability to write to and publicly voice their opinions on works, often telling creators how they would do certain things, chiding them if they felt the story or art should be one way when the creator did it differently. And well, there's nothing wrong with having an opinion. After all, isn't that what we're doing right now? It's one thing to voice it, and another thing to threaten and go after someone for not agreeing with it. This is exactly how Misery plays out, as after a car accident leaves author Paul Sheldon broken and bedridden, a strange woman has taken him into her home and begun caring for him. She reveals pretty early on that she's a fan of his books, the Misery series, and gushes how she loves the characters and the world they inhabit. Soon, however, this turns to sour ash as she is frustrated with how the last book ended. how Sheldon wishes to kill off the character in his latest book because he frankly wants to be done with the series. And she takes it out on him in numerous ways, including the most famously known scene, the hobbling. Perfectly portrayed by Kathy Bates, Annie Wilkes makes Sheldon's life a living hell, and he tries to desperately escape her. As an added bonus, if you're a fan of this film, the second season of the series, Castle Rock, explores her origins as a young girl who grows up to become an unstable nurse. Very worth the watch. Number 9, The Silence of the Lambs. Probably one of the most recognizable horror movie villains up on that pantheon, along with Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, and Michael Myers. Hannibal Lecter embodies both grace and menace as the once acclaimed psychiatrist turned cannibal at the center of this film. In the film, Hannibal is already incarcerated, and this is based on the second book in the series. And so we are introduced to him through the eyes of young field agent Clary Starlin, who is tasked with interviewing Lecter for possible insights on a serial killer case, the Buffalo Bill Killer. As cunning and investigative as she is, though, she is no match for the almost mechanical mind of Lecter, as he picks her apart during these interviews, and even manages to manipulate events that lead to his eventual escape. The other villain of the film, Buffalo Bill, is equally as terrifying, but in a more brutish sort of fashion, as he kidnaps women so he can skin them and use it to make himself a human bodysuit, transforming himself into what he sees as his true self. There's even a brilliant twist ending which will leave you at the edge of your seat in a heart-pounding sequence of events unfold in a dark basement. Highly recommend you watch this film. There are several others in the series, but this is still the best. Number 10, Psycho. Based on the book by Robert Bloch, the story sees young Norman Bates, a meek and bumbling man, in charge of an old motel, taking in a few weary guests. His first guest is Marion Crane, a woman on the run who had just stolen $40,000 from another hotel, so that she can get married to her boyfriend, Sam Loomis. While staying the night, she overhears Norman arguing with his mother, and she notices the house is full of taxidermied creatures. During a conversation with Norman, she tells him he should have his mother institutionalized, and he becomes offended by this. A short while later, while taking a shower, Marion is murdered by what appears to be Norman's mother. As people come looking for Marion, and the theft plot begins to expand, more and more guests stay at the Bates Motel, and end up in similar dire circumstances. But the real kicker is, and spoiler warning for a 60-plus-year-old movie, is that Norman's mother has been dead all along, and he has split personality where he puts on her clothes and a wig and becomes her. In the end, he is caught, but we are left with a question as to which personality is the dominant one. This film inspired countless numbers of whodunit slashers in later years, but none have matched its unique presentation. If you haven't seen it, it's an absolute must, a classic of the genre. Thanks for checking out the video. What's your favorite psychological horror thriller? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to tap that bell icon to stay up to date with our latest releases. You can reach out to us on Twitter or X at StudiosFat, or chat with us on Discord, linked below. You can also support us by purchasing anything from our merch store, also linked below. I've been your host, Jamie. Remember, the mind can be a dangerous place.